So, first off, thank you all for coming to this virtual event. Lauren's launch for Last Hang Standing. It's very
Woo!
exciting. Um,
Woohoo!
oh, look at that other cover. That's so cool.
Yeah. But of course, since we're in the US, please purchase this one instead.
Belmont Books is located outside of Boston. Um, and we're just doing our best with these virtual events. So thank you all for coming. We have a couple events over the weekend for kids. There's a drag story time and a choose your own adventure event at 1. You can check it out on our calendar online. And then next week, we're having another launch on the 18th with Jessica Treadway in conversation with Julia Glass. And Jessica was in the Globe, I believe, last Sunday. So that was kind of cool. And then we'll get into intros, and I will leave it to Mary and Lauren. So I'm going to start with Mary first. We were chatting before the event started. So she is a native of Austin, Texas, and she received her MFA from Boise State University. She's still there. She is the author of the novels The Roxy Leathers and Wildfire. She's also a regular contributor to the Oprah magazine, and her work has appeared in the New York Times and The Millions. And then Lauren is a reformed legal counsel who writes funny stories. Hailing from Malaysia, she lived in the United Kingdom, France, and Luxembourg before moving with her family to Singapore, where she is ostensibly working on her next novel. Mm-hmm. She also promises that Last Hang Standing is not based on her mother whatsoever.
But it might be.
It might be. She's not admitting to anything. All right, ladies. Handing it over to you.
So much, and we'll see you in a bit.
Yes.
So Lauren, it's so nice to meet you, and I just absolutely loved Last Hang Standing, and I'm so excited to talk to you about it. But first, will you tell me just a little bit about where you are right now and how you've been spending the last couple of months?
Hi everyone. So I'm Lauren, obviously, and I'm currently in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, which is, I like to tell people that Malaysia is under Thailand and above Singapore, so that people get where it is. So that's where I am right now. I'm sheltering in place, I guess, with my family, and I've been spending the last 2 months under partial lockdown. But since the cases have dropped drastically, like the number of new cases, so Malaysia has lifted a lot of the restrictions, and life has pretty much returned to normal. So just in time for me to go to a bookstore. So the bookstores are open now, so it's really great.
Good. Yay, that's
for
wonderful.
1 week.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's very, very good timing. I'm so glad to hear that.
And I don't know about good timing.
Well, okay, it's good timing in bad timing. But
yes, that's it.
Could you tell us a little bit about Last Hang Standing?
So Last Hang Standing follows the adventures or misadventures, if you will, of a 30-something lawyer who's based in Singapore, who's basically trying to climb the corporate ladder while also fending off the unhealthy interests her parents and her family have in the love life. You know, just trying to have it all. And it's set in Singapore, and it takes course over a year. And we are basically following Andrea as she tries to find the meaning of life. That's how I put it. And of course, there's some romantic subplots. There's always some romantic subplots.
And would you be willing to read a page? This book is so funny, and Andrea has such an amazing and unique voice. I would love to hear it if you'd be willing to read a bit for us.
Sure. I have a slight sore throat, so please excuse me, everyone. Hope. That's what the Spring Festival, the most important celebration in the traditional Chinese calendar, is supposed to commemorate, aside from signaling, the coming of spring. Renewal, A time for new beginnings and fresh starts. Green stuff grows out of the ground. Politicians fulfill their campaign promises. Concert tickets for A-list pop stars never get scalped. Babies get born and nobody gets urinary incontinence after. And Chinese families all over the world come together in honor of love, peace, and togetherness. But this is not that kind of story. This is a story where bad things happen to good people, especially single people. Because here's the deal. For folks like me who find themselves single by February, Spring Festival is not a joyous occasion. It's a time for conjuring up imaginary boyfriends with names like Pete Yang or Anderson Lin, hiring male escorts who look smart instead of hot, marrying the next warm body you find, and if all else fails, having plastic surgery and changing your name so your family can never find you. For desperate times, call for desperate measures. And there's no period of time more desperate for single Chinese females all over the age of 30 everywhere than the annual Spinster Shaming Festival, aka Chinese New Year. God help us persecuted singletons. God help us all. Spring is coming.
Thank you so much. And I love how you're right out of the gate in the novel with just a voice that is so, so funny and refreshing. Okay, so I read that writing is not your first career. Can you talk a little bit about your background before you wrote Lasting Standing and how you came to write this book?
So, my very first, I have a legal background. So my very first job was actually in the humanitarian sector. So I was working with the UNHCR, which is like the refugee agency for the United Nations, for about 2 years. And I met my husband, and we moved over to Luxembourg to pursue economic opportunities, as we all do. And yeah, I started practicing law in an area which I maybe never envisaged myself practicing in. Just like a little bit like Andrea, I guess. And I did that for a few years, and then we moved back to Asia. I moved to Singapore with my husband, and I made a conscious decision to sort of like move out of that field and go back to the humanitarian sector, which is where I first wanted to be when I studied law. And I worked with Doctors Without Borders for 4 years,
Wow.
and had a lot of like, I think, bandwidth just to like write in the middle, not in the middle of the night, sorry, at night, and to try things that I never thought I would try, such as stand-up comedy. So I tried stand-up comedy for 2 years in Singapore, because I don't know, I like pain. I don't know.
Yeah, can you tell us like a little bit, what was that like? Did you go to an open mic? Like everything I know from stand-up, I learned from watching The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. But it just seems like it would take so much courage. I'm a shy writer, so to just step out there. Can you talk about that experience a little bit? That's just something I've never done.
So for people who don't know me, I'm actually quite shy. So when I was first challenged to go try stand-up by my friend who's a fellow comic. He was like, "Oh, you write funny. Why don't you try going on stage?" I don't know. Maybe he liked, Schadenfreude. He liked seeing people suffer. I don't know. So he told me like, "You should try this. It's gonna be really fun." It was not, but I got hooked because I like watching stand-up. I love stand-up, so I watch a lot of it. I used to watch a lot of it, and so like for me, stand-up was like just therapeutic because I was going up there, I was just saying whatever. I was terrible for like 6 months. I didn't know what I was doing, but I just like, I was like, whoa, it's like a confessional and I don't have to pay anyone. And it's like a confessional. I'm just gonna tell people things, but my life seems to be funny because people were laughing along at one point, and I was like, there's something in there. And I just did that for like 2 years. I wasn't great on stage, but I was learning from people who were better than me, and that has helped my writing as like a comic writer. So I did that for 2 years, but just like you, Mary, I'm a shy person, so it was just a little bit like counterintuitive to go try stand up, right? But that's what I did.
And how did that kind of segue into writing fiction, or were you already writing fiction?
So, like many lawyers out there, and I'm sure I speak from experience, so I can say that. Like many lawyers out there who had a dream of becoming like a novelist, I kind of thought I would be a writer, like growing up.
Mm-hmm.
But and then I discovered very soon that like writing as a profession, at least in Malaysia back then, was just not a very viable career if you like expensive beanie babies. So my mom told me. So she's like, maybe you wanna. I mean, she didn't dissuade me. My mom is not a tiger mom, so I just wanted
Okay.
to make that clear. She never said like, "Oh, you need to study like 15 hours a day." I'm exaggerating, of course. 15 hours a day and like get into a top university. Um, she didn't do any of that, but she did want me to maybe be practical, and I'm a very practical person. So that's how I I kind of like went to law because I'm bad at math,
Yep.
but I'm very good at everything else. So it's
And
like
good
I
with
can't be
words.
a quant. I actually thought I would be a doctor, but then like when I actually shadowed someone, I, I was very close to going to med school. But when I actually shadowed a doctor, I was like, okay, no, I can't do this. So yeah, bye.
It's going to be law school.
Yes.
And in Last Hang Standing, you wrote a book that's like deeply cultural for an audience that is international, because we know
Yes.
it's been released in the US. And I'd love it if you could read a paragraph on page 8 about Eng Pao that illustrates that.
All
And then I'm
right.
going to ask you kind of what some of your challenges were in writing this deeply cultural book for an international audience. On
Oh,
page 8, it's towards the bottom, there's a big paragraph. I really hope no one gives us Eng Paos, and I apologize
oh
if
yeah.
I'm pronouncing that.
Oh yeah, I love this one. Okay. Hold on a sec. Excuse me. I really hope no one gives us ang paos, Linda said darkly, oblivious to the suffering of others as usual. They get extra bitchy when they do. I'd rather they just insult us without feeling like they earned it. She was referring to the red envelopes containing cash that married people traditionally give out to children and other unmarried kin, regardless of age or sex, during Chinese New Year. For kids, it's a great way to get extra pocket money. But getting ang paos as an adult in your 30s was a special kind of festive embarrassment, akin to getting caught making out with your first cousin by your grandmother. At least the adult recipient can comfort himself, imagining the internal weeping and gnashing of teeth that married ang pao givers must undergo as they are forced to hand over their hard-earned cash to another able-bodied adult. In our experience, the intrusive questions and snide put-downs were definitely the giver's way of alleviating the mental agony of this reluctant act. That's
So
it.
I was just like telling my husband about that paragraph, and he was dying laughing. It's so funny. And can you talk about
Thank
like
you.
how you met this challenge of writing very culturally specific, a very culturally specific novel for this really, really broad international audience?
That's a really good question. I had a discussion with another writer about this recently. So I had always known that I wanted to get published internationally because it's kind of the only way to sort of make a living, because you
Mm-hmm.
like there's small presses in Singapore and Malaysia obviously, but if you get published there, it's very hard to make a living. So I always understood that my finished product should be a book that would be digestible by an international audience. Um, and but that being said, everything in here is culturally authentic, like
Yep.
everything. And so the challenges were for me was how much of the local Creole Singlish.
Mm-hmm.
Singlish is like a Creole, like an English Creole that people speak. How much of that to actually, in essence, distill in the book? Because if a Singaporean person or a Malaysian person who's never been abroad or studied abroad would tend to lapse into Singlish when they speak with other Singaporeans. It's not to say that their English isn't good. Their written English, their spoken English in formal situations would be perfect, but
Yeah.
it's just that, you know, in an informal situation, we would speak Creole. And so the English Creole, I mean, Singlish. So it was something that for me, I had to balance and
Yep.
try to make sure that like I get the essence of it in the book, but not maybe um, confuse people. So yeah, that was like a delicate balancing act I had to do.
Yeah, and for me, it was really fun to read. And for some of the English expressions, there's an asterisk with a little footnote, kind of explaining it. And I thought that was really delightful, and it made me feel like I was getting this really insider view into the world, but it wasn't overwhelming. And along those lines, like you're very, it seems like you're multinational. You've lived many places. You speak several languages, I believe. Like, how does that? Could you tell us like what languages do you speak, and how does that affect the way that you think when you're writing and your language?
So Malaysia used to be a former British colony, for those of you who don't know. So like a lot of the population here speak English very proficiently. Of course, it also depends in a way on your socioeconomic class.
Okay.
So my family actually went to English speaking schools because back in the day, like all the schools were taught in English.
Mm-hmm.
That was the medium of instruction, right? So at home, I grew up speaking mostly English with some like Chinese dialects because my parents are not from the same dialect group. So even between themselves, they converse mostly in English, even though they
Okay.
understand each other's dialects. And most Malaysians speak Malay, which is the national language. And so I speak Mandarin as well because I went to school and learned Mandarin. And I learned French before I went to university for a year. And when I was living in Luxembourg, I studied French and worked in French. I'm not very fluent. I make tons of mistakes, but I'm conversationally fluent. So for me, like, how does that enrich my writing? Um, I think that when you speak many languages, your brain is wired differently, if you will, and it kind of helps you when you write to sort of explore different maybe structures. I mean, this is not a literary fiction book by any means, but like in my short stories, because I used to write short stories as well, and I used to submit them for competitions and stuff. I I think that like being multilingual really helps in the way you write
Yep.
in your main language. At least it has for me, because you might explore different types of phrasing or sentence structures. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I speak some Spanish and used to speak more Spanish for my job, and read a lot in Spanish, and it allowed me to sort of think in different sentence structures and with a focus on different sort of types of sentiments. I don't quite know how to explain it, but I think I understand a little bit. I understand what you're saying.
Oh no, yeah.
So, and I also want to say, like, even though you're saying this is like maybe more of a commercial than literary novel, it's beautifully written and delightful. So I just really, I loved and enjoyed your writing. But okay, so as the book begins, you read that passage where Andrea and her cousin Linda, they've arrived at this Chinese New Year celebration, and they know that they're going to get all this pressure from their aunties to marry. But it seems to me that Andrea, there's so much pressure on her in different areas of her life. Like, you know, there's pressure on her. There was to go to top school, to become a doctor or lawyer, to own property. And she talks about this being a particular kind of familial pressure. And she talks about the concepts of like sacrificial love and filial piety. So can you talk about a little bit about that and how that is present in Chinese Malaysian culture, and why you wanted to write about it?
That's a good question. It's just been so ingrained in us in a way, and like that we should respect our elders, we should take their opinions into consideration. It's just really like part of the culture. I mean, like if there's one thing that binds like most of the Chinese people in the world, because we're everywhere,
And I think that that's the one thing that binds all of us is this like concept of filial piety, like respect for your elders, like taking their opinions and consider the opinions and their thoughts and their teachings into consideration when you go about your life. Yeah, so I'm really distilling it into like a soundbite, but of course it's
Yeah.
much more complex.
Complicated.
For me, it was important to reflect that because it was a source, at least for me, for some of the conflict between my family, and I guess this is a way to work through it because at one point you start saying to your family like, okay, these are the boundaries that you
Right.
shouldn't cross. You know, just like there's a passage in the book where Andrea and Suresh talk about inappropriate WhatsApp messages. I'm just going to let the reader read it and find out. It's like all these things, right? Like, where is the line that you draw and you tell your family, like, hey, no, stop, sorry, this is really not appropriate, or I don't feel comfortable with this. So, as someone who's experienced a little bit of this, in terms of my like personal dating life, this is something that maybe I'm trying to work through. So it might come across in my book, but it's like a tension like most kids face, kids who grew up in traditional Chinese households, and it's just like my way of working through the things that I had experienced.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm actually really glad that people saw that the tension and to understand that even though we might have that struggle, it doesn't mean that we don't respect or love our parents. I think respect for our elders in our culture is good. That kind of respect is something that really binds the family together. So ultimately, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I felt the tension gave the novel so much complexity because Andrea and her friends, they're like out, they're partying, they're popping prescription drugs. Some of them are, sleeping around a little bit. And yet, when it comes time to face their aunties, they're like terrified and have like shopped particularly and prepped their lives. And it's really, really important to them what their aunties, who they only see once a year, think of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I
That's
just
true.
thought that was really fascinating. So along those lines of pressure, there is this sort of Andrea is looking for love, and her parents, or her mother, her father's passed away, but her mother makes it really clear that she needs to marry someone of Chinese descent. And there's a passage about this sort of like casual racism that she's dealing with at the bottom of page 92. I'm wondering if you would read it. And I think it's a passage where she's chatting with Suresh about this. Yeah, so her office mate, for those of you who haven't read it yet, her office mate is from London, but he is of Indian descent. And so he and Andrea are kind of talking about how even though they're from different cultures, they're both dealing with this sort of same problem of racism in their families in a way.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You wanted me to read?
Oh, so it's page 92.
Uh-huh.
And it starts where Suresh says, you know what?
Oh, okay.
And just the rest of that page in the very beginning of the next page, if you wouldn't mind reading that.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so Suresh and Andrea just had like a discussion about his engagement. Yes, and he was just saying that like, he'd always been expected to marry a good Indian girl. So I'm just going to read from there. So this is Suresh speaking. You know what? It seems strange to hear this, but I'd never really given serious thought to seriously dating a non-Indian real thought, he said. Don't get me wrong, I love Anusha, but she's quite literally the epitome of a good Indian girl from a good family. And that's what I'd always assumed. No, my parents would want for me. I'm sure that if I ever dated anyone that didn't fit this mold, especially if it's someone from another race, he shrugged. Well, I don't think my parents would be too pleased about that prospect, to put it very mildly. My parents would flip out if I dated someone from another race, I admitted. It's strange, isn't it, how this form of racism is still accepted under the guise of ensuring that the new addition to your family has a similar cultural background and value system? I have very little in common with an ethnic Chinese who spent all his life in Vietnam, for example. Yet somehow we're expected to understand each other just because we have the same skin tone and features, he finished. Look, I don't know you very well, but I think we definitely have more in common than you would with that Vietnamese man. Okay, that's the end of the reading.
Yeah. So I really love like that this sort of expectation that both of their families have that they marry someone that is in her case of Chinese descent, in his case of Indian descent. It creates this tension between them right away. Like she can't even consider him as a romantic partner in her mind, because even though he fits every other criteria her family would want. And so is that, just could you tell me a little bit about that and why you decided to make that an element of the book?
Sure. We were talking just now about the concept of filial piety and like how that had related to my personal life. So just like personally growing up, I mean, I had seriously dated people from a different cultural background. And my parents were always saying, yeah, but you know, it's going to be difficult for you when, especially if they're from a different religious background. Without going into it too much, that was something that I had experienced growing up, and they weren't necessarily racist. That's what I was trying to say. I'm just distilling like my experiences into these scenes. Not to say that this ever happened to me personally. So, but there are elements of it, right? And for me, it was important for me to portray as someone who truly believes that that's not acceptable. For me to say that, like, why do we still have these thoughts about not dating outside of a culture? And why is that still accepted? Because this is called casual racism in dating, right? So I wanted to show how ridiculous it was. But I had a real think about that recently, and I think it's because for a lot of the like diasporic communities, why they have that kind of requirement, it's because when they had moved to their host countries, I think it is possible that some of them might have experienced like othering or discrimination in other ways based on their race or their appearance or their skin tone, and it's possible that like to try to mitigate that happening to their offspring, to prevent that from happening to people they care about. So these aunties or uncles or mothers or fathers are telling their younger generation like, hey, no, you know, stick to your own kind, because it's not even about like race, it's also about like the culture. It's like stick to your own kind so that you don't necessarily have to be othered. You don't have to face all these difficulties that we face on a day-to-day basis just being us. So I think that's something that like I wanted to put out there, just to see the other side of it, so that people don't go like, oh my gosh, why are these people so racist? They're not. It comes from a place of hurt, I think. They are not outwardly racist, but this is something like I wanted to show, like casual racism even in dating is not acceptable, but there are reasons for it. It comes from a place of hurt most of the time, and fear of the other, fear of a different culture or whatever. And I feel it's really relevant in these times, but just like for me, it was important for me to say like it's not okay for my characters and for me personally, but it's something that I explore kind of like tangentially sorry, through the novel. So it's up to the reader to make their own decisions. And whether she makes the right choice in the end, because there are two love interests.
Yes. And I will not give away how it turns out, but one thing I also loved, you approach these difficult and complicated subjects with so much humor and levity that it makes it, reading it is like of such a joyful, hilarious experience. And it really caused me to learn so much and think so much about these things. And one thing I thought was really interesting is Andrea is like so driven at her job, and she's working really hard to make a partner in her firm. And she puts in insane hours, and she's really an expert in her field. And yet when she makes one mistake, there are huge repercussions. And I have to think that has to do with her like being a woman. And I just wanted to see if you talk a bit about why you wanted to include that and how you managed to do it in a way that was like also kind of lighthearted and still fun. I was just really admiring that move.
Oh, thank you. So, so I myself experienced like discrimination at workplaces. I mean, I don't want to go into details because this is not the forum, but like, and this is in institutions where you would think it wouldn't happen,
Yeah.
but there you go. So for me, it was important to like still say like no matter how much, women have progressed in the last century, we're still facing these kind of this like forms of discrimination at the workplace. And I just put it in there because it came from a place like it came from my own experiences, and I feel for Andrea because it's like she's doing so well, as you said, but at the end she's still stymied by the one thing that she can't change. So it's an immutable part of her. And yeah, it was just something I wanted to put in there, but it came from my own experiences, and yeah.
And I was I love, she makes a lot of jokes about how she has to put in these long hours, but she doesn't get the benefits that she would get at some like tech firm that would provide like fancy meals and beanbag chairs and ping pong tables. And she's kind of resentful, which makes sense to me because when you're working, such long hours, it's hard to feed yourself and like shop for healthy foods and exercise. So she's always trying to navigate that. And one thing that I noticed, there's a running joke in the book about her like month-old pedicure. Like a lot of times she feels shame because she's out with these like sort of raggedy toes. And she's also noticing a lot of women in her life who've gotten like Botox and fillers in an effort to look youthful, but now just look sort of weird. And so I was wondering if you could talk a bit about playing around with these sort of beauty ideals in a way that was really funny and also sort of heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, the petty manicures. That was a fun running joke. Yeah. Okay, it's a complicated question. There's so many aspects to it. Okay. I think in Asia, and I don't want to generalize, but at least in my part of the world, in Southeast Asia, like there are a lot of stereotypical notions of beauty that are placed on women still, and things like, oh, you have to be slim, your skin has to look a certain shade or stuff like that, depending on your ethnic background. So for me, it's just a way for me to insert all these things into the book. It's not necessarily like the central theme of it, but there is a somewhat an obsession about like youthfulness, and well, I guess that's common across all cultures, right? Like the pursuit of beauty and youth, it's especially hard for women. But I just wanted that to be in the background. It's not really something that Andrea like bumps up against. It's not something that she's particularly like challenged by, because I think Andrea in her own way is very comfortable in her skin. But she still has to deal with what society expects from someone her age and her status. Yeah. So, that's why there are like jokes about her like wearing Spanx and for dates and like trying to dress up and look a certain way. But I think, Andrea's a little bit like all over the place, and like looking beautiful is not top of the list for her.
No.
Yeah, and I like that. I like that she's very comfortable in her own skin. She's not trying to diet. She's not trying to exercise. She's just. I don't like it. I don't like what I have to. I don't like all these expectations, but I still have to deal with them. So she's dealing with them, but it doesn't really bother her. But yeah.
And that confidence, I think it comes across like she can roll up at a super fancy party in her office casual, and she's still like attractive because she's herself in that way, and she is self-confident in the way that someone in a couture gown that's really self-conscious wouldn't be. So I thought that was really amazing. Okay, so the book is written in diary entries. Can you tell me why you chose that as a form, or how that form came to you?
Yeah, I like the diary form because there's an intimacy that you get from diary entries. You write an epistolary novel as well, so you get that. There's like it's you putting your thoughts on paper, almost unfiltered. But of course, as writers, we all know that we're filtering it. And it's like there's a sense of intimacy, and you feel like if done well, you feel like you're right there in the action. So while I do use the diary form, there are some scenes where I splice in traditional like narrative,
Yeah.
like chunks of it. So it's kind of like a mix of both. And yeah, the diary form just gives that element of like funny things, you know, like sometimes you look at the timestamps and they're like so close together, and like it's because like something funny happened and you're showing it in real time.
Yeah.
So for me, that was like part of the fun, for me anyway.
And I think it works so well. And so I read on the book jacket, on the American version at least, it compares the book to Bridget Jones' Diary and Crazy Rich Asians. And I'm wondering, like, are those texts that you read and kind of studied when you were working on this, or did they affect or influence you at all?
Sure. So for me, like growing up, I read the Adrian Mole Diary series.
Oh yeah.
I love them, and Bridget Jones' Diary. I mean, of course, I've read all of them. I have all of them. I love, 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 love Bridget Jones' Diary. And I think these books influenced me a little bit. Of course, like, you know, as writers, we're always drawing inspiration from books that came before us, right? I mean, your book as well has been comped as Bridget Jones' Diary, and I found it really funny, by the way. I just wanted to tell you. And I think like there's like of course like some similarities in terms of like the form, but it's wholly original. Like the situations that she's in are completely different. It's cultural setting, the challenges she has. And I think like the other comp title that was used was Crazy Rich Asians, and there are some similarities in the sense that like in Crazy Rich Asians, the setting is Singapore. There is also a discussion about like filial piety and culture in Crazy Rich Asians. But of course, the social milieu that my characters find themselves in, they're not from that social milieu. They're not uber wealthy. They are very rich. Some of them are very rich or come from families that are very rich, but they're not uber wealthy. I recognize that they have privilege, of course, and yeah, but it's just not exactly the same setting. And for many of them, they're still working professionals. They still have to work for a living. So even though they have access to like the fancy vacations and stuff, they still have to pay their own mortgage. They're still struggling. They have access to all these luxuries, but they're still paying for it. And if they get fired, if they have no job, they're gonna be in trouble. So it's not the same social milieu as Crazy Rich Asians at all. So those are the differences. There are some similarities, but differences.
And Andrea, like, she's able to go to a party of someone who's incredibly wealthy, but she's worrying about how she's needs to keep performing well at her job so she can pay her mortgage. I see there's a huge distinction there. She doesn't have parents who are going to float her mortgage forever,
exactly,
or anything like that. And she's not shopping for couture gowns. She's a Zara girl.
Yes.
And could you? Oh, hi. How's it going?
Good. Finish up whatever you're
Hi.
gonna ask, and then we can open it for questions.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Lauren, could you talk a little bit? Like, you're publishing in the U.S. with a big 5 publisher, and you have like life experiences that make you a little bit of an outlier in that you come from a legal background. You don't live in the US, you're a writer of color. Can you talk a little bit about how this experience has been for you, as someone who, as the word that you used was an outlier to that industry?
Sure. So for me, like, even though I had mentioned that I wanted to have my book published by a big 5, I was very naive in the sense because like I I didn't go to an MFA. I'm not based in the US or the UK, so I don't have access to the ecosystems that like most baby writers have access to, like,
Yep.
workshops, Asian meet and greets. So that's what I meant by outlier, because like I felt like there were so many things I didn't know when I first got my agent and like a book deal. I was like, I would say certain things and people would be like, well, this is common industry knowledge. But I have a really nice agent. She's so good. Her name is Allison Hunter. So she's been really patient. She would like write everything down to me and for me. And so for me as an outlier in the sense that like I don't have access to these ecosystems, and I don't have experience in an MFA or any kind of writing program. It was a little bit tough in like sometimes I feel very isolated over in Malaysia because you like support systems to help you through this process, because it's very alienating sometimes. You have to like do a lot of things on your own, and then you're opening yourself up to like criticism online, and you need people who understand that. So I want to shout out to my 2020 debut group on Facebook. They've been so great. So many good authors coming out this year. I mean, debuting this year, and I'm like so pleased and so lucky to be in a group that's that supportive. And it's genuinely a group that like it's a safe space for people to discuss things, and I really appreciate that, especially in this day and age where social media takes like one soundbite and just like runs off and goes into a Twitter mob. It's good to have a space where you can meet people who are going through the same things and be able to say whatever you want and also get constructive feedback.
Yeah.
So I mean, if people like out there who are like thinking, I want to be a novelist, I want to write and be published, it's so good to find yourself a writers group or something and have that support system. It's so important.
Absolutely. And Allison Hunter is my agent as well. I completely adore her. And did you just reach out to her by email?
Yeah, I co-submitted. I mean, I had narrowed down like I had a list, right? And she was on that list, and yeah.
She's so amazing.
Serendipitous. Yeah.
I could talk about how great Allison is for a long time. So so we have questions from the audience?
Yeah,
Sure.
people can just like put them in the chat function. I know we have one pending from Susan. You should be able to see it, Mary. And then I'll also be posting a link in the chat where you can buy both Lauren and Mary's books from our website. If any of you would like to do that. But you can also just put your questions in chat, and then Mary and I will get to them.
So the question is, can you talk about your experience of writing sex scenes for this book? What was easy? What was difficult?
Okay, so like one of my favorite bookstagrammers, Brady, I hope I'm saying her name right. She said like my book is closed door sexy time. And I think that's completely accurate, because there's nothing very explicit about it. And I did think in my head if I wanted to like go into a more explicit mode of writing. I mean, a lot of it was like hinted at, but not really. Like there's nothing explicit, just so people know. But there's a lot of tension, which is fun to write. I don't know. I'm just not. I don't think I would be very comfortable writing that, but that's just me, because it's not that I'm not comfortable reading it or consuming such media, but just as a writer, it's just not something I would probably know how to write, because I've never done that before. But maybe for the next book,
But you're right, it is very sexy and there's lots of sexual tension, but you're not explicit about what goes on in the bedroom.
Yeah, I wouldn't know how to start. So kudos to those who can do that. That's a serious skill. I hope to master it one day. Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but it can be fun.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Lauren.
Sure.
Are you working on a second book?
I am definitely working on a second book. But whether or not that book will be sold depends on whether this book sells.
Will it be connected to Last Hang Standing, or is it going to be?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it will follow the sort of like
Andrea and her friends after they've made like all these life-changing decisions and in their next stage. So it would be like
Oh, wow.
the next year.
You could
Yeah.
slowly increase the sexy times in each book.
I could.
Work your way up to it.
I will try. It would be fun, I think. I could try. I don't know. I have to try writing one scene and see how it goes. If it goes terribly, I will omit it for the sake of everyone else who's reading.
And any more questions from the audience? If anyone out there has any more questions?
Will, I guess I have more questions.
Yeah, jump in.
So, there's two different, I guess, versions of the book, one for US and one for UK.
Oh, yeah.
Will there be a version that's like published in like Malay at all? Or since everyone is good with like English, it should be fine, just like the US or like UK version. I know we had a writer at the store who like was super excited that her mystery was getting translated into her like native, I think it was like Bolivian.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice. I don't know if anyone will buy the translation rights. I wouldn't know. It really depends. I mean, I don't know. I don't have a comparative title, you know. There are not many Malaysians who are published at international level. I know Hannah Alcoff, she's great. And Zen Cho, and of course, and Zen Cho, Yang Zichu, Tan Tuan Eng, Tash Al. But like aside from Tan Tuan Eng, I think everyone else is based overseas. Oh, and Hannah and Tan Tuan Eng are both based in Malaysia. And I think Hannah does have some novels in Malay, but I'm not sure about Tan Tuan Eng. So the short answer is it really depends if anyone wants to buy the translation rights, but I don't necessarily think that people would be interested in doing so. We'll see.
And Susan is also wondering if you did have a US tour affected by the pandemic. Like, did you have a book tour planned that got canceled?
Not really. I mean,
Okay.
I think being an overseas author, that was something that was not really discussed, and
Mm-hmm.
at least for me in the juncture that I'm at. I had some tour dates planned for Singapore, Malaysia, and Japan, which is odd, I know, but I love Japan. So I had actually spoken to one of the biggest bookstores there, and they were interested in carrying my book and having me. Yeah, and like we were just saying to Ori, who is my UK editor, that I would be able to go over, and she was like, "Yeah, let's do that." But then the pandemic struck. So for me, I mean, the other issue is that the turnover for my book was really short. It was like 10 months. So like the whole like planning the tour thing, I mean, we're 3 months into like the global health, public health crisis, right? So a lot of it just didn't really materialize solidly.
Yep.
Yeah, so
And are there
yeah.
other online events that you're doing that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I'm doing a wine and books event with Belcanto Books
Oh,
on the
neat.
18th, and I have quite a few events in Malaysia and Singapore over the next 2 weeks. Online virtual events.
Mhm.
Well, the Malaysian ones are actual in-person events now, I think, because we're post-lockdown. But yeah, so a lot of the events are actually here in Malaysia and Singapore. Yeah.
Great. And Stacy says, hello from New York. Excited to read this and excited to see how
Hi.
you pick Singapore. I'm really missing my hometown right now. And Susan said that is a short turnaround. So was it 10 months from when you turned in your final draft to when the book came out?
No, 10 months for my book deal. 11 months. Yeah, 10,
Wow.
11 months. So it's really, really short. Yeah, so not that much time to think about like events,
Yeah.
especially with the coronavirus taking up like the last 3 months. But yeah,
exactly.
it was just
It was
so
fast.
it was really fast. I had proposed to my editor to say in the US to say like if you guys would want to do something, I can do something. But it was just they were saying you might want to concentrate on the promotional stuff in your country first, and then we'll see how it goes. So nothing in the US, but definitely things were starting to set up in the UK, and I had other things in like I had something planned in Luxembourg because I have family there. So I go back every summer. So I had stuff planned in Luxembourg and Japan, like rough dates, you know.
Yeah.
So then everything happened, and I'm like, no. But
well, and now we just have to shift and learn about the joys of meeting people online. Like I had a book tour that got canceled, but then things like this are so amazing because if you were doing all your events in person, I would not be getting to meet you, which is really delightful.
Exactly.
So, yeah, there are some silver linings.
There are some silver linings, yeah.
Lauren, you mentioned Yangtze Chu. Have you read The Ghost Bride?
Not The Ghost Bride, The Night
Tiger?
Yeah, quite a while
ago.
The
Ghost Bride is a Netflix TV show now.
Yeah.
It is
yeah,
so
it is
good.
really great for her. And
Maybe
she's
you'll
so
get a
nice.
Netflix TV show, Lauren. Fingers crossed.
I would watch it.
I would love that. If anyone's from Netflix,
book is available.
I would love a movie deal.
Yeah.
Or a series. I'm fine with either.
Call UTA.
Yeah, I would love to see them on the big screen or a small screen or whatever screen that our future holds for us, because we don't know if movies will be a thing even next year. So
no, we don't know, but I would love to watch them in action in these characters on film. So I'm hopefully looking forward to that someday.
Thank you very much, Mary.
Any last questions? Mary, do you have any burning questions?
Well, let me think. I have so many questions. We didn't get to all of them, but my one question that I have for Audrey is, how do you feel about the actor Keanu Reeves? Do you have any feelings or opinions about him? Audrey and I like him a lot, and we were just wondering if he's on your mind as well.
Your mic.
Is it me? Could you hear me?
Audrey's mic is muted.
Her.
Yeah. Audrey.
Audrey's one of our booksellers.
And she's amazing. I love her so much. Audrey, it's so good to see you.
Hello, Mary and Lauren.
Hi.
The question is, I don't know if I love Keanu Reeves as much as Mary does.
I think he's a national treasure. He's an icon. But Audrey and I have different favorite Keanu movies. Her favorite is Speed, if I may.
And we are always debating.
Oh my gosh, Audrey, you sound like a robot. Your internet is terrible.
It's the internet.
Hers. That's why I can never host these things.
Yeah.
Get out of here, Audrey.
But Keanu Reeves is my favorite. Speed is my favorite. And I'm sure Susan is talking about, I hate squirrels, and pandas are the best. It's another debate we have in the store.
Squirrels versus pandas. Okay. I would vote for pandas as well, but.
I'm not sure.
Right? What?
I don't know. Squirrels are fighters.
Squirrels eat my tomatoes that I grow.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
There we go.
So, Lauren, a verdict on Keanu? Are you for Keanu Reeves? Indifferent to Keanu Reeves?
I love Keanu Reeves. Have you seen him in the Ali Wong movie? He was so good in that.
He was so great in that one.
He was the highlight. I mean, that movie was amazing, but he was even the best part. I thought he was great. What is that?
I love him in The Matrix.
Always Be My Maybe? Is that what that movie's called?
Yeah, Always Be My Maybe.
Be.
And of course, I love him in The Matrix. And I love Constantine. Has anyone seen that? I really like that film.
Lauren, that's a deep one.
Okay, Constantine.
But Point Break is my either Point Break or Lake House is my second favorite.
Okay, Lake House I haven't seen either. Point Break is amazing. It came out in 1990. It'll change your life.
Lake House reunites Sandra Bullock and Keanu Reeves.
Oh my gosh, now I know what I'm watching.
Now you have to watch it.
Later tonight.
there's a little time travel romance thing going on there.
Yes.
Okay.
Any non-Keanu related questions from anyone else before we wrap up?
I think Keanu, that was my last question.
Yeah.
But I will just say one more time, look how beautiful this cover is. This book is
Yay.
hilarious. It's delightful. It covers deep topics, but it is so refreshing and just like such a great read. Right now, you know, it's been a difficult time, and this is a book that will help heal your soul and entertain you and make you laugh. So I just really want to encourage everyone to buy it from Belmont Books.
Thank you. Thank you
Lauren,
very
can
much,
we
Mary.
see the UK cover real quick too?
Oh yeah, can we?
Oh
see
yeah,
the
sure.
cover?
I just got them yesterday, so it's strange. I don't even have my author author copies.
Ooh.
Ooh. But I'll hold the. So this is an ARC. It's not even the real one.
They're both so
Yep.
gorgeous.
So good. Love them.
Cover designer did a good job.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you all for coming. This was so much fun.
Likewise,
Free
yeah.
to check out the Belmont Books website. We have an events calendar that is filling up now that we're not bound by time and space and geographic location. And best of luck, Lauren, with your debut.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I had a lot of fun. It was such a nice interview.
And then for anyone who came in late, we usually upload these to our Belmont Books YouTube channel. So just type in Belmont Books. And the recording of this will be, I guess, uploaded within a few days.
Yay.
Thank
Thank
you
you very
all.
much, guys.
Thank y'all so much. And Lauren, congratulations. I'm
you.
so excited for you.
Thank you so much, Mary. Have a really nice day, everyone. It's evening, right? Isn't it?
Evening.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna get my coffee.
Okay, good. Have a wonderful day. So nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Likewise.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.